Well, hello.
I forgot that I had muted us. Hi,
Well, now
everybody.
you're unmuted. And hello. Happy Tuesday, Yvette.
Happy Tuesday. It is delightful here today. It was like not hot and not humid. And I went to the park and I hung out with my dog on my patio. And I'm in a much better mood than I have been because the weather has been good. How's the
Isn't
weather?
it amazing? Here it's a cool 89 degrees. It's sunny.
Okay.
Not too bad. It's not too bad.
89 is pretty bad.
Well, I think what it is we are so cold in the winter that really anything that's not -30 we're just happy for it. So we're pretty easy to please in the Midwest.
Yep, I get it.
Well, I am super excited to talk about our topic today. It's kind of a 2-for-1. Actually, I might even say a 3-for-1.
Oh.
Today, as you might have gathered from the subject, we are talking about finishing seams. We've got FlatFelled seams and we've got French seams. And you might wonder, why are we talking about this? We do mostly quilting. So how does this relate? What I'm even more excited about is to mention as part of this conversation, our Stitch Lab. Stitch Lab is open, and if you are new to us or if you are maybe uninitiated, as they might say, it's a great community to get together to talk about things. What I love the most is each month there is a challenge project. And this month's challenge project brings all the seams that we're talking about into our quilty little hands. And maybe I hope I'm not bearing the lead, but maybe we talk about the seams and then we'll get a little bit more into Stitch Lab.
Sure. So when Allison and I were planning out what this live would be, we decided I would do the demo for French seams and she would do the demo for, is the term flat-felled?
Flat-felled seams.
So I don't even know what those are. So I will be watching this demo fresh. But I've done French seams before, so I took French seams. So if you're watching and you've never heard the term French seams before, it's mostly used for garment sewing, but it's a way to make a seam that it's entirely contained, meaning you don't have to serge the inside to keep it from unraveling. You don't have to quilt it to keep it from unraveling, right? So us quilters, we make a 1/4-inch seam allowance, and then because that top is going to get quilted to a back, a middle and a back, that's what keeps those seams from unraveling because it's not moving around inside the quilt. But on the inside of a shirt like this, if you didn't finish your seam and then you washed it and dried it and pulled it over your head and everything, especially if you were using quilting cotton, like a woven quilting cotton, right? It would fray and eventually you wouldn't have a seam anymore. You'd have no seam allowance and then eventually you wouldn't have a seam. So one of the ways you can finish seam so that it doesn't unravel is this technique called a French seam. I have no idea why it's called a French seam, but it's essentially sewing the seam twice, once and then again to close it. Should we watch the little demo that I did?
Yes, let's.
And by the way, you feel free to put questions in the comments if we're saying a term you don't know, if you have done it and you have an opinion about my tutorial being wrong, whatever it is, you can put it in the comments and we will keep monitoring the comments and respond. I'm going to play the video now.
We're going to talk about French seams today. To start with, I have these 2 squares of fabric, and I picked print fabric to make it very clear. There's a right side and a wrong side, and for French seams, it's a very odd first step. You're going to use the wrong sides together, which is not what we normally do, no matter what we're sewing, right? Usually we do right sides together and we sew from the wrong side. But for a French seam, you start with wrong sides together, right sides out. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew a seam. If you're following instructions, a pattern, or whatever, it'll tell you how what seam allowance you should use. If it's a garment, for example, it might tell you to sew at a 3/8 seam allowance and then trim down and then sew the second seam. As quilters, we're pretty comfortable sewing very small seams. So you could take that instruction and adjust the steps. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to sew, this is my 1/4 inch foot, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam as the first one and then a 3/8 inch seam as the second one. So the first step is really simple. Us quilters, we know all about sewing a straight seam. No big deal at all. I'm just going to go and do it. And I'm using a contrasting color thread. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to sew a seam. Oh, you can see I didn't line up very well at the end. If you're doing garments and this step, you would probably pin this seam, right? To make it more accurate. Okay. So here we have a 1/4 inch seam that is on the right side of the fabric. We're wrong sides together. Right side of the fabric has the seam. The next thing I'm going to do is take this to my iron, and I'm just going to press this seam to one side. It doesn't matter which side you pick, just you want it to be flat before you do the next step. Okay, I have pressed the seam so you can see it's nice and flat, pointing in one direction. Again, it does not matter which direction you press it in. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold so that that seam that I just sewed is the fold line. See what I'm doing here? That is the seam, the wrong side of the seam, and I'm just going to fold it right there. Put the project back in to your machine, and on a Bernina, there's marks on the, well, pretty much every machine has marks on the bed of the machine. They don't all have the numbers written on it, so it can be a little confusing which mark is which. You could just take a ruler and double check, but the 5/8 one is marked. The one right before 5/8 is 1/2, and the one before that is 3/8. So I'm going to use the 3/8 guideline. I'm not bothering to change feet, but you could change to another foot if you prefer. I'm just going to keep this foot because I am confident enough that I can follow this line even if the foot is a 1/4 inch foot. So I'm doing my second seam, and you can see this is not at the 1/4 inch line. I'm aligning it to the 3/8. The second seam has to be bigger than the first seam because you're trying to encase the entirety of that first seam allowance in the second seam. Okay, that's done. Here's my second seam, and now this one looks more like what we're used to, right? The wrong side of the fabric has the seam sewn on it. When you switch to the right side again, you have your nice, beautiful seam. And on the inside, you have a completely finished seam allowance. This is not going to unravel. This is not going to get caught on things. You don't need to do a serger finish. You don't need to do a zigzag or anything like that. You do have to sew the seam twice, but pretty much any finishing technique involves sewing the seam or the selvage twice. So it isn't much more work than normal, and it does look much nicer. You can use this for garments, or things like zipper pouches would be nice with this kind of finish as well.
All right. What do we
Very
think?
cool.
Does that seem like something worth knowing and like put it in your bag of tricks?
I think so. Now, I had never really thought of using it to finish like a zipper pouch or a bag. That's a great idea. I see it a lot in pillowcases, specifically the burrito pillowcases. You get a nice, completely finished inside, no seams, no raw edges. You can wash it as many times as you need to, and you don't lose that seam allowance.
Right, and this pillowcase is a great example of something that gets a ton of wear and tear, right? Like when you're putting the pillow in, you're stretching that pillowcase out. So if you didn't have a finished seam allowance, eventually you wouldn't have a pillow anymore. You would just have scraps, right? Right, a good example.
Yes. Awesome. Well, a very similar technique to a French seam is the FlatFelled seam. And we'll go through the video on how to create it. But you see this mostly, again, in garments. If you wear jeans at all, the seams that go down the sides or the seams that go down the inside, those are going to be a flat-felled seam. And some of the benefits of this is you get a super strong join because you're sewing it up to 3 times. I'll show you different ways where you could get less than that, but it's up to 3 times that you're sewing this. You're getting your entire seam allowance encased, and it really locks together. I've got some examples here. It really locks together that fabric. So let's watch through the video. I'll show you how to sew a flat-felled seam, and then we'll talk about some different options about why quilters might care. So to join 2 pieces of fabric using flat-felled seams, you start like all great things start, and that's at the ironing board. What I'm doing here is lining up 2 pieces of fabric, right sides together, with a 3/8 inch overhang on the bottom fabric. You take that, fold it up over the top fabric, and use an iron to press to get a nice crispy fold there. You can change the size. The 3/8 inch is just a good, nice size to start out with. You could certainly make this larger, although probably not smaller. We're over at the sewing machine now, and I am sewing, zooming in a little bit here so that you can see I'm sewing right on the edge of that raw edge. So again, right sides together, the bottom is folded up over the top, and I'm right on that raw edge of the bottom fabric that's folded over the top. Feel free to use a stiletto or what you need to do to help get that last little bit through the sewing machine, but sew right to the edge there. Once that's sewn together, you're going to open up the fabric. I'm going to clip off my meter here. But open up that fabric, and what you'll do is you'll press that seam to the side with the raw edge to make sure that that raw edge is fully covered. Now, I would recommend pressing. I didn't here, just to keep moving here. But now you're going to stitch on the top side, on the right side of the fabric, right up against that edge. So you really are just edge stitching here as close as you can get to the seam. So like I said, pressing would have been a really good idea here to get a nice flat seam here, but you know, it's organic, right? So this is the traditional method of flat-felled seam. There's one more seam, so you're going to count 3 in total here. So 1 to join the fabric, 1 to edge stitch that seam, and now you can either do it on the right side or the wrong side, but another top stitch, just as close as you can get to the edge of that folded seam. So that is what's going to give the 2 stitching lines on both sides of the fabric. You can see on the right side there, that seam that I just finished doing, there's basically 2 stitching lines there. The goal is to get them as close as possible so that from the wrong side of the fabric it looks like just one, but you might see a little area where those 2 stitching lines diverge. But stitch right against the edge there, and here is the traditional method of sewing a flat-felled seam. And you can see that the raw edge is fully encased, and that first seam is nice, super flat. Now there's another method too. If you don't want to sew the same piece of fabric 3 times to get that, there's another method. It's going to start out exactly the same way. You put the 2 pieces of fabric right sides together, measure 3/8 of an inch, fold over, and press. Now I would recommend using a ruler for this, or a hot ruler for this. The more accurate you are with this seam that you're folding over, the better it will look. Now, if you go a little wonky at this stage, your whole seam is going to be in. So here's where the methods differ. If you remember the first method, I sewed all the way up against that raw edge,
here I'm actually going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And so you'll notice that that's not going to get me all the way to the edge of that 3/8 inch fold. But for here, it's really important to stay true to your seam allowance. It doesn't matter what the left side of the fabric is doing, as long as the right side, I have that consistent 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can see here, after I'm done sewing that 1/4 inch seam allowance, I have a little bit of fabric that's not quite caught under that. It's flowing free. That is quite all right, because what's going to happen is I'll take that and fold that over right where that stitching line is. So it's going to encase that raw edge that's hanging loose. And with this one, I did go ahead and press that open and the seam allowance to the side to cover up that raw edge. And now here I'm going to stitch right on the edge. So here's where that top stitching comes in for this particular method. Stitch right on the edge of that seam allowance. So now that I'm almost done with that seam, going right to the edge here. Now for this, you can back tack or not. It's completely up to you. So for this particular method, you can see that there's 2 stitching lines on the wrong side of the fabric, but when it was flipped over, there was only 1 stitching line on the right side. One more method for you. This is going to start almost the same, but you can see I've got the fabric wrong sides together now. Measure the 3/8 inch just like before. Let the fabric up against the ruler, or again, a hot ruler would work really well here too. And a hot ruler is just a ruler that you can put underneath your fabric and use your iron on it. So you'd use it as a straight edge, fold your fabric over on top of the hot iron, and just press on top of that. Not like acrylic, it wouldn't melt. It's made of a paper product. So here I'm going to press, get a nice crispy fold here, and then take that to the sewing machine. You could also pin if you'd like to. So this is going to look pretty familiar to that second method, in that I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance from that folded edge, and so you'll catch pretty almost halfway down that fold, probably a little bit less than that. So staying very true to that 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm stitching along. And again, I will press open and press that seam allowance to the left. Now that that's pressed, you can see I've turned my fabric 90 degrees, where the seam allowance was facing to the left before, now it's facing to the right. Same piece of fabric, just putting it in the machine a slightly different way, which is actually a good reminder that you can orient your fabric whatever works best for you and your machine. In this particular case, it was a little bit easier for me to do it this way, just the angle I was at. So this one I'm going to, just like option number 2, I'm going to top stitch very, very close to the edge of that fold. And here you're getting a great view of my hands, but we all know what top stitching looks like. I'll show you when it's all done. So coming to the edge here, you can see with this particular method, it is giving me a single stitch on the wrong side and 2 stitch lines on the right side. So just a breakdown of the different methods. With this one, wrong sides together, you get 2 stitch lines in the front and 1 in the back. The second method, that middle method, where we had right sides together, it gave me 1 stitch line on the front and 2 stitch lines on the back. And the original method, this one was the 3 passes, and it gave me 2 stitch lines on both the front and the back. So I hope this helps with your flat felled seams, and just know there's many different options for you to choose from.
There we go.
Okay, so when do you use option 1 versus option 2 versus option 3?
Here is the quilter's answer to that. So I will preface my answer with this is only in the very limited application where a quilter might use this. Now, garment making might be a different answer. It depends on how many stitch lines you want to show.
Okay.
And so the strength is going to be, I would say, roughly the same. If you are making jeans, for example, or something that's going to get a lot of wear and tear, go for the first method, the original method, where you make your pass and then the 3 stitch lines. If you're doing anything else, which actually brings us to kind of the thing I'm most excited to talk about today, it doesn't really matter. The other thing I love about these methods is you get to choose how wide your seam is. If you want a really decorative
Right.
element, you can make a wider seam. 3/8 is probably the smallest I would go. Yvette, as you said in your video, we are very used to very, very small seam allowances. Anything less than that gets a little bit tricky. But that is...
Wait, I have one more thought.
Sure.
When I was watching you top stitch, I kept thinking, this is a good job for an edge stitch foot. Do you have an edge stitch foot on your machine?
I did not have one for the machine I was using, and that is kind of the pitfall of a quilt shop, is sometimes you just use the machine that's closest, not necessarily the best one for the job, but it would be absolutely perfect for an edge stitch foot or like a stitch in the ditch foot. It would be great for that.
Yeah, that foot on the Bernina, it's the number 10, and it's Andrea's favorite foot. And until I started working with Andrea, I literally had never heard of an edge stitch foot. And she was like, what do you mean? That's the best foot. Like I got indoctrinated into edge stitch feet because of Andrea.
And didn't it open up a world of excitement and possibilities for you?
Different kinds now. So
yeah, we've got one for the Jukies in the shop, and it's kind of a game changer. It's great for binding. It's great for the stitching in the ditch, as you would expect. And it's especially great for this kind of application where you have a seam or some kind of path that you're sewing against. And if you, I just would beg everyone not to look too closely at my stitching, because I used a color so that you could see the thread. My lines were not as straight as I would have hoped, but...
I'm not quilt police. I hope you're not also. We're still getting to know each other. I don't know, but definitely not quilt police over here.
Nope.
The machine you were using, was that a Juki also?
That was a Juki. Yep, it was a Juki Hazel.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the line. I used to have a Juki 2010Q. Way back in the day. That's a straight stitch only machine for anyone who's watching who doesn't know. But I liked it because it had a 10-inch throat. And so like I did a lot of sit down quilting, and that was a great machine for that. But once we started selling Berninas, it was like, now I'm spoiled. I don't want anything but a Bernina now. You know?
Yes, indeed. But really, I think I can't think of a single company that doesn't offer an edge stitch foot.
Yeah,
so you can find it with whatever machine you have. Yeah.
Exactly. So why are we talking about this?
Why are we talking about this, Yvette? We are talking about this because I'm so excited for the challenge that is part of Stitch Lab. So we'll take a step back. If you're not familiar, we talked a little bit about Stitch Lab in the beginning, but it is a community of I would say like-minded modern quilters who love a little bit of a challenge. The last challenge that we basically meet once a month and get together and talk about the particular challenge. We get to share our projects that we work all around a theme. So last month's theme, and correct me if I'm going off the rails here, last month's theme was all about hand stitching. And so it was
portable projects, but
portable projects. I'm so sorry. You are correct. So, and I will say that some of these projects were very lovely and very large. So I'm not sure I would... Right? But that's the great thing, is you've got a theme to work from and you spend the month working on projects, or it's a great excuse to pull out projects that you have that maybe fit in that category and share them with people who love the things just like you do. For August, for the August meeting, we will be talking all about it's kind of all encompassing, but it's a Korean, let's call it an art form called Bajagi. And I am not Korean, so I apologize to.
Yeah.
We've watched a lot of videos. But what Bojagi is it is roughly, and I would say very loosely, the um, the art of wrapping things. And so at one end of the spectrum, it's wrapping and wrapping gifts in beautiful fabrics. But what we're more interested is the other side, and that is the artwork of Bojagi. And that really is all about using things like flat-felled seams, in some cases French seams, to make beautiful artwork, either utilitarian or not, with the fabric that you have. And so that is what brings us to this. We will show you a couple of examples of different pictures that you can find, different images you can find. But you can see in a lot of these cases, it's pieces sewn together using seams as a design element. And that's why these flat-felled seams work out so well, because they make a design element of themselves, which is why I was talking about you could go quite thick with your seams. You could go a little bit thinner. In some of the examples, just like this one, you can see as you hold these fabrics up to the light shines through and gives you this beautiful color wash of your fabrics. And then those seams, again, are a design element, making a darker version of that. So no longer do you have to do the stained glass quilting. Yvette, are you familiar with the stained glass quilting where you take black bias tape and yep.
This kind of has that vibe, but very different.
Very different, yes. So that is the challenge. Now, showed you machine methods. There are also hand stitching methods to do that if you want to, I guess, combine two of the stitch labs and make a very portable Bojagi project.
Right. And traditionally they would have done it by hand, but I think most people probably do it by machine now. And I want to clarify one thing about Stitch Lab. So in the group is self-led. The members are, every month we're talking, and as a group, we're deciding what the next month's challenge is going to be. It's not like there's a curriculum ahead of time. It's not like Gotham decides, here's 12 months of challenges. It basically depends on who shows up to the meeting. And by the way, the meetings are recorded. So if you can't make it, we meet on the second Thursday, is it?
It is the second Thursday.
Second Thursday of the month.
We're going to have producer Ken fact check that.
Well, also there's a QR code on your screen so you can scan it and go to the website, which tells you. But it's a 7:00 Eastern time meeting time. And we do meet live on Zoom, but if you can't make it one month, like all of us have stuff to do. So maybe you can't make it that month, you can watch the replay later. So, you don't have to come to the meeting, but if you do come to the meeting, then you can be part of deciding what the next month's challenge is going to be. We usually pick 1 or 2 months out. And we also have opened it up to not just quilters. So one of the members, she's primarily an embroidery artist. She's not primarily a quilter. So she'll take whatever the challenge is and apply it to embroidery, which is pretty cool. I think ideally we could get, crocheters or
knitters,
tatters. I don't know what else people might be into, because all I do is quilt, right? But that's why we named it Stitch Lab. We originally had, way back in the day, we just had Quilt Lab, and it was very quilt focused. And then eventually we added an embroidery lab. So we had 2 different meetings that met once a month. One was focused on embroidery, one was focused on quilting. And then at some point, a bunch of us were like, this is too many meetings. We don't want to go to all these meetings. So we merged the 2, which is how we ended up with the term Stitch Lab, so that it's like more all-encompassing, right? So whatever stitching you're doing, you're welcome to come. And we do try to alternate between kind of artistic themes. So for example, we once did a Make Brown Modern challenge. So like in modern quilting, you almost never see brown, right? Brown is very prevalent in traditional style quilting, but you don't really see that much brown in modern. So that was the challenge. Like, do something that would fall into the modern category using brown. That would be an art kind of challenge, right? It's not technique focused, it's color focused, I guess.
Mhm.
So art, right? We once did one on negative space. Shrinking something was a concept, right? Like, take something and make it smaller and see what. And also, there are no rules, right? So you can make whatever you want. Like, somebody once came to a meeting, they had made slippers. Like, I don't know why. They just, like, whatever the challenge was made her think slippers, so she made slippers. You can make whatever you want, and everybody has different amounts of time. So, like, how much effort you devote each month is completely up to you. There's no scoring, there's no grades. It's the idea is for us to grow as quilt artists or embroidery artists or whatever other kind of stitching you're doing. So we tend to alternate between a technique challenge and an art challenge. So this month we picked Bojagi, which is a technique. And just so you know Jen Strouser, who used to work with us and is still around, and one of my best friends. The reason she's so into Kawandi now is because it was one of the challenges we did in Quilt Lab like 6 years ago. And just like lost her, like none of us had ever heard of Kawandi before. And then somebody brought it to the meeting and was like, I just saw this video online about this technique that it comes from India, blah, blah, blah. And we all tried it and it was pretty cool. And then Jen just like took off running and has come up with all these cool new things to do. And it all originated from somebody being like, this is interesting. I want to learn how to do this. And we all just explored and brought to it, our own twist.
Yeah, certainly a great time to shout out Jen's Thread Talks next month, all about Kawandi. So one of the ones that I know a bunch of people are really excited for. We do have some seats available for that still, but definitely not one to miss, because
I'll put that link in the chat. I should have thought to put that in the QR codes, but I did not remember.
I remembered, but then I promptly forgot. So my apologies.
All right, it's in the comments, so you can click through if you want to come to that talk. That is the August talk.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm very excited for this particular, I guess, this particular challenge. It just is really fascinating, and you could go so many different ways. Another piece that I saw somewhere out in the internet wilderness is, if you haven't found a use for those fancy design stitches on your machine yet, this is the perfect example to get it in, because you've got that lovely seam to put something fabulous in. Why not take advantage of that space and use some of those design stitches on your machine?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You could just do a line of decorative stitches in the middle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like
yeah. So really, I mean, it's just to get you started. The outline of what Bojagi actually is.
Right.
And I rather love the idea of making something fabulous to wrap a gift in. And then, the gift is just that much more special. The wrapping becomes the gift as well.
You reuse it, right? Like, if you use wrapping paper, when you tear it, you can't use it again, right? So these wrappings you could use again.
Yes.
It's also really good use for scraps. Like, even if you have really weird shaped scraps, there's a little bit of an improv element to this idea, because you're just putting pieces together to make a flat, whatever shape. Well, technically, it wouldn't have to be a square, even. You could make like a triangle or whatever shape you want, right? The other technique or other use I've seen recently for them is to make curtains, because you get this like transparency effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Might not be the best example here, but you can. No, probably not. I needed a light behind it.
Yeah, the transparency there, the print, I think, would get in your way, right? So often they're using like an Essex linen or a shot cotton, so that it isn't as dense of a fabric, so that you can see through it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything that maybe looks the same. I've seen a lot of batiks, so look the same from front and back, because you have this completely finished seam. Either the front or the back would both be a lovely to look at.
I saw somebody who did a log cabin. So
Mhm.
like I usually see the ones we showed just now, most of them were very improv-y, right? Like it was just like a bunch of shapes. But this person did like a formal log cabin with pieces cut to the right size, and then the felled seams just made the shape. And you have a reversible flimsy essentially, which is
Yep.
pretty cool.
And it's finished. You don't have to quilt it.
Exactly. You're done at that point.
You're done, which is the best kind. Didn't we say well, I something we say in the shop, the best quilt is a finished quilt.
And I love the quilting step, but I know I'm in the minority with that. So yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
Me, I'm a big fan of the cutting step. I could cut all day long.
You're kidding.
Mm-mm.
Oh,
It's my favorite part.
cutting makes me anxious because I'm afraid of making a mistake.
Mhm.
And also my hands don't like it. So yeah, because it's like you're holding that position too long. You know how most patterns tell you to cut everything up front and then do the piecing?
Yes.
I never do that. I always cut, just enough so I can do something and then go stitch and then cut again and then go stitch. Because like if I do the same thing for too long, then my hands get all cramped up.
Gotcha. You know what we need is a quilt posse. I'll do the cutting. We need to find somebody to make the top, and then
Round
you can do the
robin kind of
quilting.
thing.
I think so. We'll pass it around. It'll be the quilt that we all built.
And every once in a while, you meet somebody whose favorite step is hand stitching the binding, the last step, right? And like a lot of us are like, hand stitching and binding. I'm not doing that, right? So it's like that's perfect. You want to do nothing but hand stitch bindings? I think we can find you some.
I think so. Yeah, I think we maybe just need one or two more people. I think I know someone who loves to hand stitch a binding. So
yeah, I can think of 2 people off the top of my head where that's their favorite step.
I don't quite get that part, but
to me, it's so boring. Like,
it is.
It's not creative.
It's the one part of quilting that's kind of portable, right? You could bring the quilt with you and stitch on the couch.
Yeah. And I think what people like about it is that it's meditative. It's like very repetitive and it's very neat looking, right? So like you're kind of like bringing finishing to chaos, right? Like covering that last raw edge, and it's perfect. I can get the appeal. I just think it's kind of boring.
It's not your appeal. I get it. That's totally fair.
We're all not my vibe. And by the way, I have not hand stitched binding in 10 years. I always do machine on both sides, always.
I don't blame you, not one little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
well, I am so thankful.
Finish in a year, right? Like if you're you're making lots of samples, it's pretty hard to do the hand stitching part.
If there was a shop out there that hand stitched the bindings on their quilt samples, I think I would lose my mind.
Surprised, yeah.
I suppose if it's the owner's favorite thing to do, well, then maybe she just finds the time.
Oh man, imagine if it's the owner. Yeah, like it's not like a sample maker.
Yes. Goodness. Well, I think it's fabulous. I don't see any questions in the chat.
Yeah, so apparently we were very clear.
Well, and I think it's pretty probably 2 pretty straightforward things that maybe quilters aren't super familiar with. I know that until this particular challenge, I had never thought of sewing a flat-felled seam because I just didn't need to.
And I didn't know that term, so.
But it does, I tell you what, it does get the seam super duper flat. So if a French seam is a little too bulky, maybe try this route. But for something like the pillowcase or something where you don't need a whole lot of extra strength, a French seam is easy peasy and the way to go.
Yeah, and I just like the idea of you're able to do piecing without then having to the quilting. Like that's an interesting variation on the thing we do all the time, right?
Yeah.
So you'll come up with all kinds of different ways to use that.
Absolutely.
So we'll see what people come up with. So I think we maybe didn't actually say this out loud, but at the meetings that we do every month, it's show and tell. Whatever that theme was for that month, whatever that challenge was, the people who come to the call who did the challenge, I'm like infamous for never doing the challenge, although I did do something for this month. Everyone's going to have a heart attack when I show up with actually have done something. So people who come to the call, they show what they've done. Usually we put a picture up. We use the community site for this, and you can put pictures, you can upload your own pictures. We've found that it's easier if you take a picture ahead of time and upload it than try to like, hold up the thing on the camera. So and then we don't really review people or like critique or anything, but there's a lot of like, why did you decide to do that? What's the background? Is this for somebody? Is there anything you would have done differently if you could do it again? Right? Like we're trying to learn from each other in every call. Absolutely.
Well, I can't wait to see what your deliverable is for Stitch Lab.
I'm just so proud I did something. Hooray! Shock of all shocks.
I think everyone's going to be really surprised. So that, I think, is reason enough to sign up for Stitch Lab and make sure you come to the August meeting.
Yeah, so if you sign up now, you get access right away, and then you can come to August. You don't have to do the challenge if you don't have time. We understand people have different commitments and all that. But if you have time to do a little something, that would be great, and come show us. I'm pulling up the calendar to see what the actual day of it is in August. It's August 14th. So yeah, second Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern time is when we meet.
So we've got plenty of time to finish up our projects.
Yeah, it feels like 3 weeks. You can do something for sure.
Indeed. Yes.
All right. Do we have anything else we wanted to talk about?
We talked about Jen's thread talk, which I wanted to make sure, just a reminder, the link is in the chat here. Definitely sign up. Kawandi it's quilting, hand stitching, big stitching. It's having a moment. Yeah, it's definitely having a moment. And you want to talk about another great way to use up your scraps. It is definitely Kawandi.
Yep.
Yes. Well, I think we've got it. Thank you all for joining us today. Thanks for the great comments in the chat. It is, like I say, it's a pleasure to see you guys virtually every Tuesday. Be sure to join us next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. That's 6:30 Eastern time. And we'll see you right here either on YouTube or Facebook.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Bye.